this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is, what is today? December, Friday the 4th, yes. Uh, let's hop into it, because there's basically zero accountability section. This month, and pretty much every year, I think, seasonal affective disorder kind of hits a lot of people, including me, on different scales. Some people are severely affected by it. Some people just kind of slow down as the sun becomes less and less prevalent, um, even for people who tend not to be outside in the sun that much, like gamers. Um, Forestcraft and Bloodcraft. I'm going to re-roll that because I've played enough of Forestcraft and Bloodcraft for a while. And that leaves us with Havencraft and Shadowcraft to play. But yeah, over past couple days, I haven't done anything. I haven't even worked on my server, so even the nerd talk, which I've been way too much on, I've been catching up on the newest event on Destiny Child and Destiny Child Defense War, the spinoff game. I'm still, now that I could reinstall it and play it again, I'm kind of playing with that. Although, at a certain point, I definitely need to realize that there's just no game there. It's just a terrible tower defense game. Let's see. Do we want to open cards first? Yes, we do. Always start with opening some packs. And we don't have any packs here. So do we want to spend money here, or are we trying to build up gold? Because kind of inherently, we're not making the greatest progress either way as far as getting to that 400 level. What would have been really helpful, and I know this game was fairly generous at the start by giving you a bunch of cards from pretty much older expansions that can't be played in the standard playthrough anyways. But it would have been very, very helpful if they had given you 400 tickets to start with as far as the classic card pack, which I think is different than a basic card pack, but they really didn't. So nobody who's new to the game can really experience the card pack point system and understand how that works. And I couldn't even at the moment, if I wanted to, buy enough packs with gold. I could buy 44 packs, which would get you a little bit closer, but it's still not close enough. So yeah, I don't even really understand how that system is supposed to work. And then a lot of these tournaments and things also are built around the idea of potentially playing multiple times and paying for that. And there's a lot of different ways in games like this to pay, and this game is no exception to that by any means. But we also aren't having the worst time because of the monetization. If anything, we're just having the worst time because of the daily quests kind of being incessant and being difficult. And like a lot of collectible card games, there's just not a lot of instances where you get that random win. It definitely does not feel like we are anywhere close to a 50% win ratio. Here we have one of the characters from One Punch Man. Yeah, so let's, I suppose, go through the video game news and not make this a drawn out stream, as Wednesday's stream became rather drawn out, and then we can call the weekend. I suppose for the accountability section, I could say I've recognized that I've got a little bit of a backlog on my Legos sets, so I'm gonna I tried to build some sets, and I might do some more sets this weekend, but I am fairly rushing at that point. But yeah, there's definitely some sets I bought. Oh, I would say almost a year ago, and I still haven't gotten around to putting them together. Uh, which there definitely is also a increase in the number of Lego sets that I did. Like I really started off buying like the Millennium Falcon, uh, and then did not buy another set for like 2 years, and then maybe I bought one set a year, and now I'm getting down to the point where I'm buying significant percentages of everything that comes out over the year. It definitely is something that is going to be an issue. So there's one news story I heard of, and I don't have an article really to show about this, but the co-founder of Campo Santo, the company that made Firewatch, and then immediately got blacklisted from me because they threatened, although I'm not sure they ever actually did send out a DMCA against PewDiePie, because they were mad at PewDiePie for one of the many made up controversies, which I think that's about as much as you can really say around him. Like, one cost from the amulet and an amulet in your hand. Oh, you can do that, sir. So that co-founder in particular, who was the one that threatened or actually did file the DMCA, became an employee of Valve. I'm not sure if not all the 2 or 3 people that worked at Campo Santo, I'm guessing there was less than 10 that worked at Campo Santo, became Valve employees. And they have, in fairness, all those Campo Santo employees up until this point been fairly quiet. They didn't come into Valve and institute major SJW politics or anything like that. I think the will of libertarianism is too strong for there to be like, so see, can we give something that has a ward in it?
Salvation lies in reason's judgment. The real battle begins.
So, sorry, went quiet there as I'm trying to figure out what cards I really want to play and when. So that co-founder has been working at Valve, or quote unquote working, as you could say with any Valve employee. But in this instance, we particularly know he hasn't really been working that hard, because he's also been playing Dota 2. And this is where the story comes in, because there really is nothing newsworthy for saying that Valve has no tight control or accountability for its employees, and that they are either encouraged or required to play video games that Valve owns, like Dota 2, and test things out, quote unquote. So he's been playing Dota 2, but the story comes in is that he was playing with a player, and the player made a suggestion as to a strategy that inevitably did not succeed. So the player made a quote unquote bad call, and that co-founder of Campo Santo, the person you would you would expect to be a professional, someone who is at least in part playing in his professional ability to probably test out the game, went into the system that apparently all employees are allotted at Valve, and manually banned that player from making a bad call. Not that the team reported him, not that there was any overview or oversight to it. This Campo Santo, former Campo Santo founder, Valve employee, just banned somebody because he didn't like the gameplay call that the player made. And the good news is this wasn't just swept under the rug. It wasn't a case where Valve backed their employee and doubled down and made some kind of ridiculous false accusation against the player, which I think a lot of times that probably would have happened. Valve did investigate it. Valve did say it's a bad idea for employees to all have direct access to this. There are 3 things you can take from a story like this. First of all, that this co-founder of Campo Santo, maker of Firewatch, is still a self-entitled jerk. That is in no way professional, and we've seen this in the previous instance also. Like, it would not have been professional at all to have announced you were going to DMCA PewDiePie to the public. If you were going to DMCA PewDiePie, you would have done it in private and perhaps let the lawyers sort it out. I'm sure this character probably has several tweets if people were just going to try and go through his Twitter feed that shows him to be a flaming SJW, and I assume that's what he is, because that really did scream about just not involving your business and your product in something that had nothing to do with you. It wasn't a case that PewDiePie was playing Firewatch and then did something professional, controversial. PewDiePie was playing a completely different game and did something that was trumped up as controversial, or was controversial. It also, on top of that, shows that Valve employees have no oversight and that they really aren't working that much. Like, there's not a decent argument for any potential programmer to be playing Dota, even in their off time, frankly. Like, you hear all this talk of crunch and working yourself at 12-hour, 10-hour days. There's no room for a programmer who is actually programming a game to be playing Dota. And particularly playing Dota enough so much that you actually care about a win ratio to the point where you're banning people trying to make yourself yourself and your team work there. It also shows just an incredible lack of teammanship. So there's a bonus feature. It also, on the third point, shows, in my opinion, and this is going to get mostly down to a political argument that most libertarians aren't going to want to admit is true, but I think is exactly true. It in my opinion, shows the exact problem with the idea of libertarianism in a nutshell. It's the rough concept of libertarianism is that everybody will just do everything they want, and that there will be limited to almost no government whatsoever. That the police would be private, the roads would be private, everything would be private. You would just pay for everything outright, and somehow that's going to also magically be cheaper for everybody involved. Inherently, that rough concept falls apart and is shown to fall apart here, in the sense that the second anyone gets any sort of advantage at all, they will potentially abuse it. And without a government, which also might abuse those powers, but at least then there is a central focus of the people's rage to counter that. But the second any individual organization gets any advantage at all, they will abuse it, and this libertarian fairness concept that is libertarianism is built on falls apart completely. In this specific instance, each of the players on that Dota team were doing whatever they wanted to do. The only quote-unquote government there would be the rules of the game, and Valve potentially banning anyone breaking the rules of the game, or breaking Valve's rules that are supplemental to Dota. So then you have the co-creator of Campo Santo, both being an entity that at all times represents the government, in this case Valve, having a specific advantage due to his position and immediately abusing it, which at a certain level that is corruption. That is, and corruption would happen in any kind of governments, any kind of governmental system, but in the libertarian concept, as opposed to almost any other concept, the resolution for that corruption is not that that either the people uprise and overthrow a government, or that the court systems step in and arrest and overthrow the political actor who's abusing his power, or the police step in and arrest a corrupt government thing, or the military comes in and has a military coup. Even like there, under the libertarian system, a corrupt government actor, any corrupt actor in the government or otherwise, can do anything they want to do, and only if the aggrieved parties, the victims of that corruption, can have enough money to hire some kind of private government or private military to go arrest / kill / dethrone this corrupt government agents or this corrupt actor. Only if you can out-finance that corrupt actor can you resolve the situation towards a fair, what almost anyone would argue is a fair outcome. And inherently, you won't be able, as a victim of corruption, to be able to outspend under libertarianism to overthrow a corrupt government actor or corrupt actor just in general. It could be a corrupt business also. But you won't have enough money to outspend that corrupt entity, that corrupt person, because that corrupt person will inherently use his corruption to have more money than you. It is a completely asinine system that makes the assumption, and I'll get off this rant fairly quickly here, but it really, libertarianism is this asinine system that makes the assumption that everyone starts off with the same amount of money, everyone has the same ability to make the same amount of money, that no corrupt actor could ever manipulate a system to have more money, and that the only rule of law is money. Therefore, it is just this almost Ferengi-based concept of wealth makes right, and whoever has the most amount of money wins, which is not a system that I think even libertarians, once you actually force them to look at reality that way would agree to. But of course, certainly, I always have a bit of an economics bent to my viewing on things like this. But because at the core of it, that was very much just a story of a corrupt employee. Now, what should happen to this co-founder of Campo Santo, in my opinion? Valve is a little too nice, frankly, and they probably should fire several employees for several things that they have done. There's, I think, probably significant numbers of internal concepts that have been leaked. Also, and those employees probably should have been fired too. There definitely are Valve employees that just aren't really contributing much. I don't think a significant number of employees at Valve are being given the opportunity to make a good game anyway. So the whole structure of the company is a mess. But in this specific case, they have brought shame and controversy to Valve, a company that probably does not want shame and controversy around it in the same way. So there should be some level of punishment. And this is almost certainly a case where you could easily suspend him for a week or two for abusing his power. Suspend him for a month. Pick a number, and almost certainly then he would react so immaturely and so badly to that he will either get upset and quit on his own, and then you can just blame it on him for being immature, which that would almost certainly work, or he'll take it on the chin and just come back and promise to never do it again. A lot of that really does just boil down into the kind of interview that you're going to have with them. If you have this interview with him and say, look, what you did was wrong. We want to hear you say that it was wrong. We want to hear you promise to never do it again. As you discuss it, this could easily be a interview where he could show contrition and say, you know what, I'm right. Almost certainly there's a lot of other underlying incidences that have happened that have just not come to light. I don't think he should have ever been hired in the first place, and a reevaluation at this point, if I was in charge of Valve, is due. It is a pretty great time to just fire people for any good reason, so I wouldn't be surprised if they did decide to just lay him off. And frankly, you could probably find 3 or 4 other Valve employees to lay off and just have a wave of layoffs in general. The Campo Santo owners of the company and founders of the company have failed to make a Firewatch 2. I don't think as many people as you would like would play a Firewatch 2, but they've really failed to do anything else of any interest. When you also look at what Firewatch is, it is basically a story game with a walking simulator element. So with the ability to asset flip visuals from any content store, whether it's Unity or Unreal, or even try to use the Valve Source engine to do that, there's nothing that's really being contributed around the concept of making another game like Firewatch. It's just the writing. And I doubt either one of the co-founders of Campo Santo were the writers of Campo Santo. And inherently Valve did lay off several of its writers because they don't have a game for the writers to write a story to. And you can't just have writers writing stories if the game programmers can't at least put out some kind of walking simulator or something to wrap around that story. Even if Valve started releasing just like very static, stationary visual novels, that would be something that they would release, and that they could have the writers write. That would be interesting. Would you use the Half-Life universe, or could you use like the Left 4 Dead universe? I think you would probably be fairly well to say, hey, we're going to put out a visual novel that is set in the Left 4 Dead universe. There's at least 4, if not 8 characters from the Left 4 Dead universe that you could follow and give like prequel stories to, or like post stories to. Something along that line. And that's a way you could keep the writers working. But yeah, I don't see any real value of keeping the keeping the co-founders of Campo Santo. Valve owns Firewatch and probably all the assets of Campo Santo at this point, so it would be very easy to fire the employees and just keep the games. In fact, at that point, it even becomes easier in my mind to say, well, I think I will cover Firewatch now that I know none of the money actually ends up in the hands of this specific jerk who has once again made controversy. And he has, in fairness, done a fairly good job about laying low. No other controversies have come out around him in many years. But he couldn't help himself, certainly. And in these new times of your digital presence being permanent and you having this digital permanent record, you have to kind of, everything kind of follows you, and you have to actually be held accountable for your activity. Although in all fairness, if the co-founder of Campo Santo who threatened to DMCA PewDiePie came out and said he was wrong and it had been many years, and here's my new game, and I promised never to make the same mistake. I was young and I was a jerk. There's a lot of video game developers who, frankly, if they just said I was young and I was a jerk, that might very well be enough to forgive them. Some of them really haven't done amazingly controversial things. They've just been jerkish. But yeah, it's really hard to say what should happen to an employee like that from the outside of Valve. A lot of that really happens in the moment. A lot of times, like self-entitled, narcissistic people, the second you make it apparent to them that they aren't just going to be supported and that there will be any level of pushback for their bad behavior, they just crumble and react extremely childishly. And so you can, in an interview, almost immediately see that, and the direction will change very well. There are also, in all fairness, times where employees literally want to fire you, and they're trying to find a reason, and they're trying to provoke you. So it can happen the other way, certainly too. But yeah, there seems to have been no growth as far as that. At the very least, it also shows that Valve has just been pretty pathetic as far as setting up its own internal systems. And perhaps this is a statement that everybody else is fairly more mature, or just not so ridiculously immature that they would care about a win ratio on Dota 2. That we haven't heard any stories of this happening before, considering how popular Dota 2 is. Although now you've opened the door inherently for a lot of people who were either fairly or unfairly banned from Valve by Valve employees to come out and say they were banned by Valve employees. Even people that were banned for legitimate things can now claim that they were unfairly banned. This one employee has destroyed the credibility of the entirety of Valve with his one selfish action. So, yeah, that's not the kind of employee you want, certainly, and that alone is a good reason to fire somebody. I've always been a high fan of firing people often and early, because even a medium mistake, small mistakes for sure, you don't want to just fire people for ridiculous small mistakes, but even a medium mistake ends up just becoming this albatross on the neck of both the employee and the company. Like, I am a fan, certainly, of the idea of potentially firing somebody and then immediately recommending them to a different company, just so there's a new group of people, and certainly in these pandemic times, that is probably easier said than done. But yeah, just having somebody move on to a different group of people is in general a good idea. You see that in the school systems too, is that you are better off having multiple classrooms, ideally with less kids, where you could transfer a kid to a different class that teaches the same subject and hopefully teaches it at the same level of quality, instead of having all of the students in one big classroom, particularly in the old school style of all the students in the same class for the entire day. At a certain level, people just do get tired of each other, and moving people around is a option you want on the table. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Puzzling Peaks EXE, which looks to me like it is just a kind of spinning physics puzzle game and nothing else. It's $1.99, English only, nothing interesting enough there. Next, we have a game on Steam called Marbur, which is apparently a text roguelike, which we don't see a lot of these. $3.99 is ridiculously expensive for what these level of non-graphics are. Like, I know that Rogue was recently released on Steam, and Rogue is a text-based game from a very long time ago, but this is a brand new game. This one has no historic relevancy. There's no good argument in my mind that something like this should even be allowed on Steam's storefront. That would be a very easy arbitrary decision, certainly also to make, is to simply have a blanket rule that says your game cannot be published on Steam if it does not have animated graphics of some sort. And you can potentially come about and say, if you want an exception for this, you have to contact Valve directly. I think you could arguably say if you want to release a text-based game, you have to have had an established relationship with us before, which means basically that you need to have sold some kind of visual game first, and then your weird artsy text-based game might be allowed at that point. Also, I think you could fairly easily limit it to people could publish a text game if they've sold some other visual game that has sold at least 10,000 copies or 100,000 copies. Take your pick of a number like that, and that eliminates a lot of people here. And particularly in this case, you could say only text games. Like, this game literally is only text. This is all just an ASCII art. There's not a single picture here. Whereas a kinetic, no branching path visual novel type game where it's just text, usually when something like that is sold on Steam, they at least have a background image. They at least have some level of visual appeal. This is so easy to abandon and say no ASCII art. Whereas so many other games, asset flips and such, really do require a subjective decision. They require some thought. And that is a definitely different experience. Okay. Next we have a game on Steam here called Self-Isolation, which looks to me like it probably is a kind of asset flippy boxy game, but there might be a story here. See, this is definitely a great example. You look at a screenshot like this, it'd be very easy to call this an asset flip game, but then the themes around this and potentially being isolated might actually play. Although at a certain point you also are making a game that is just echoing the realities of the current pandemic, and so that would be fairly boring. It's also an English and Russian game, which is suspect to say the least, but something like that I think at least deserves a follow. And here how many are we? 3 losses so far. All right. Gamatsu has an article here, Psychotics Colossus Down. So it's called Colossus Down. It's from Psychotic. Launches December 16th on Xbox One and PC in January 2021 for PS4 and Switch, which I wonder if we're going to start to see splits like this more often, where there's just different launch dates for different consoles and PC, where PC lines up in that. I've seen no announcement for anything like this. This does kind of feel like one of those Cartoon Network cartoons of modern day. Let's see if I can watch this video and get anything from it. Seeing a giant robot. It seems like there's a bunch of people maybe inside the robot, and it seems like you're just kind of playing as a bad guy who's running around and beating up on a bunch of things. So it does feel like it might very well just be a fairly simplistic beat 'em up game with like 2-player co-op, maybe a few puzzles, maybe a little bit of platforming. Yeah, there might be something there. There might not. Part of the problem I think here is that if this is based on some kind of cartoon, my lack of understanding as far as this cartoon um, makes this harder to relate to. A lot of this does look like Adventure Time specifically, come to think of it. And so if you told me that this was some of the children of a new generation of characters from Adventure Time, I would be willing to believe that. Because, yeah, there's a like vampire queen character who could be the child of that. There was a little Game Boy robot character. Jake, I don't think, was a pig. And then there was like a princess like character. Yeah, it does. Apparently this is the third adventure in the Psychotic Adventure series, which inherently that tells me that it's not going great for that series, because I would have almost certainly have heard of it by now in the two previous games. Tech Raptor has a review for the game Phogs, P-H-O-G-S, or Fogs, which at first glance kind of looks like a 3D Pokemon game. Or it could just be a 3D adventure game of some sort. Let's see. They gave it a 9.0. Too often these days our games are preoccupied with achievements, trophies, levels, and all kinds of complicated crafting and weaponry. Not accomplishing much. Crafting and weaponry that we don't normally sit back and play a game, and actually have fun without any kind of pressure at all. Fogs allows you to go back and experience the fun of a game at its most basic, and that's not always something even AAA games can pull off. 9.0 review score. Pros are vibrant and art and catchy soundtrack. Laugh out loud funny with doggos, kid-friendly controls for the whole family, and cons are locked camera angles. What also I would point out here is there's this character who is a freelance writer who I have not seen on Tech Raptor before. And inherently, the problem with this review is it seems like this is a very kid-friendly game, which is nice to see. But I, without reading the article, am having a real hard time. No button for jumping, apparently. That's weird. I have no idea what kind of game this is. Apparently you play as a dog. Oh, this feels like this is a cat dog like character. And they're kind of failing miserably here to zoom in the game. So best I can tell, you're playing as some kind of like cat dog like creature that stretches out and pulls back. In this area, you're probably trying to get collectibles to open this portal and potentially get further. But none of these screenshots are doing a good job as far as showing me what the actual gameplay is. And yeah, I could read the whole article, but ain't nobody got time for that. This. And I could evolve and attack. I don't want to. So let's just move on. Here we have a prologue / demo for a game called Brooke the Investigator, as in an alligator, which they're tagging as a beat-em-up RPG. To me, it seems like it's kind of more of a point and click, but I guess maybe not. Maybe there's a beat 'em up where you also pick up items, which a beat 'em up adventure game is a different concept, certainly. And I can't say I hate this animation style. It is 90s cartoon style, Western animation style. It doesn't look terrible. Of course, this is just a demo. The full game is coming out sometime in 2021, they claim. I should mention that I was on the very verge of playing the second Zero Escape game. I had launched it up, and at that point, that was when I got distracted and started doing Lego. So, yeah, that's not much to say there, really, on top of that. Alright, well, evolve. And then hit that.
Should have been quicker.
And then
There's no voice as divine as mine.
there we go. Guess that works. Next, we have a game on Steam here with Asian characters. It's tagged as a puzzle interactive fiction word game. It has a oddly like what is it when it's like this soft visuals, like over brightened visuals, kind of unique art style. I think for the Chinese audience, which I assume this is a Chinese game, there might actually be something here. At least there's a level of polish here on what otherwise would have just been a low effort word game. However, for the rest of the world, I don't think there's anything to say here. It's 99 cents, that price is not bad. Alright.
Don't give up.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Ponpu, which, what is this?
Persevere.
From the looks of it, I forgot to set up the quality of service. This looks to me to be kind of a Zelda-esque dungeon crawler adventure game, maybe with some Binding of Isaac. It seems like this character has a dash ability. It definitely feels like it is potentially animated, somewhat like a Binding of Isaac. They're saying it's closer to Bomberman, which maybe there's something to that. And these are supposed to be ducks, but they're drawn very weirdly. $14.99. The question here is how much of the online play makes sense, or how much of the single player makes sense if you're not going to do the online play, because it feels like there's kind of two different games here. One where there's an online player versus player experience, and the one where there is puzzles and like dungeons. I'm gonna put that on the follow list. That price though is particularly high.
Why pray when you can solve things? What are you gonna do? Pray me to death?
The real battle begins.
Stand down.
What does this do?
I could get used to this whole faith thing. The sound of my faith shout.
Gamma Sutra has an article here. We had kind of already talked about this. The esports platform Smash GG has been acquired by Microsoft. It is slightly questionable in my mind as far as what Microsoft is really planning on using from Smash GG, particularly considering how Mixer had fail. Smash GG got its start as a organization tool for Nintendo Super Smash Bros. Series, but since it's expanded its reach outside of Smash into the broader world of competitive gaming, according to Gamma Sutra.
Instinct is what you truly believe in.
Okay,
Let us conclude.
I'm about to lose.
Vulgar hypocrite. That didn't go well.
Yeah, I don't know what Microsoft really can do with something like Smash GG.
This here's all mine.
Like, it does kind of feel like they are just trying to invest in companies that they think will be successful, or at least gets them a foot in the door for some industries. But unlike the other acquisitions of video game companies, I seriously doubt Smash GG has any real software or code to improve esports streaming. Maybe they do. Maybe they have some kind of back-end technology that would allow esports streaming to happen better on the Xbox. Maybe their bent on this is that they're going to try to have Smash GG esports events where people are just playing from their home on Xboxes, and or people are just watching those esports events on their Xboxes. But yeah, unless they've got some kind of streaming technology, some mass broadcast technology, some commentary technology or something, it's really questionable how you could integrate anything that they have into the other infrastructure of Xbox or just gaming in general. Unlike the other video game companies, they probably don't have code that could end up in DirectX 12 or DirectX 13, unless they're just getting really ambitious. At a certain point, I also have to always wonder if the acquisition of a company isn't just pure cronyism. I think you could easily assume that Valve's acquisition of Campo Santo was just pure cronyism. But also I would argue that it probably was a failed attempt on Valve's part to simply buy game companies so that they could say more Valve games have come out in the past decade than the 0 that actually probably have come out in the past decade. Next we have a game on Steam here called Sumerius Dice King, which looks like it's a dice-based game with a lot of text. Kind of RPG game. This is kind of a great example of a game that could easily have been text, but nobody in their right mind really would have done that. So here you have something that's visually polished enough. Kingdom management game. It's $10.19 English and French. Almost certainly this won't make it off the fall list, but I'm going to be generous and put it on there. We don't have a ton of dice games in general. Probably because dice games in general are just random by their nature, and randomness is not really what people want in video games. They want fake randomness, they want pseudo randomness where it is heavily scaled. Like, I wouldn't want to play a card in Shadowverse where you actually had a random 50-50 chance of winning or losing the game, but I would love to play a card that felt like you had a 50-50 chance of winning or losing the game. Of course, you have to balance out randomness in card games, in particular against other people that don't want randomness. the better players and the players that the whales who have bought all the cards. Shadowverse actually is pretty bad about having randomness in its cards anyways. Next we have a game on Steam called Wrecked Crash Test, which looks like a polygonal racing game. I don't see anything special about this game. Like, I feel like there's better versions of racing games that would have loop-de-loops and elements like that anyways, and even tricks. This is free. That apparently is a demo to wrecked high octane stunts, but they're kind of hiding that. It supports a bunch of languages. But yeah. I think in racing games in particular, I still would very much prefer to have a see this and this and yeah, if I'm gonna play a racing game, I almost certainly want the graphics to look somewhat realistic. Next, we have a game on Steam called Tinkertown, which looks like it's a top-down RPG with pixel graphics. They're calling it a sandbox experience for multiplayers, which seems like it kind of completely eliminates my interest at that point. It's early access, 1444 English only. It says it's single player, but I don't think that's the focus. And it's from Head Up Games, which Head Up Games has made and published things before. Although, if we look on this list, Coma 2 Vicious Sister, Help Buddies DX, I don't even know why that's on my wish list. A game called Windscape.
And that concludes today's sermon.
The Texorcist, that's a tough typing game, so I'm not sure I would justify buying that. Bridge Constructor Portal, The Inner World, The Coma Recut. Super Blackjack Battle 2 Turbo Edition, which, you know, if that wasn't $11.99, I might consider it. Dead Age 1. May have gotten that for free. So, Head Up, you can see, has published a decent amount of stuff, but they are all AAA or even single A games, and definitely a lot of them are questionable. Like, how many Bridge Constructor games do you really need to play? How many re-releases of the same thing? They've apparently been publishing things on Steam for 10 years though, so you really can't discount Head Up Games just by the publisher and the brand. But you could probably discount them fairly easily. This one is like pointless. I have no 9 playpoint cards in my deck. Here we have the game El Hio, a Wild West Tale. We saw this announced quite a while ago, and I thought it was slightly interesting, playing a Mexican boy with a slingshot running around in what looks like a stealth style game. But it has been certainly complete silence for this game for a while. And I don't know if that particularly bodes well. This is $17.99, bunch of languages. It's from developer Honig Studios and Quantum Frog, which both of those don't sound like Mexican companies, and I think that may have been a small controversy, as here you have someone potentially telling a story about a culture they don't know, which some people would call appropriation. At a certain point, I can't fully agree with that because that just means artists can't tell the story that they would like to tell. Let's see. Yes.
The real battle begins.
Keep those eyes healed.
Let's hit that.
Oh, why'd it have to be a clear day?
Like, looking at the other games that this publisher has published, you can see they have published a decent number of things, but once again, not tons of them actually making it to the follow list or wish list. Although, follow list you wouldn't know. Like this old game from 2007, Safecracker, and their oldest game is from 2004. So, yeah, I'll put this on the follow list, and there's a decent chance that some people will actually cover this game next week. But there's also a decent chance that people, for one reason or another, have completely forgotten about it. And perhaps I have completely forgotten that there is some kind of controversy, or bigger controversy than just the default accusations of cultural appropriation. But if that's the case, I clearly wouldn't remember it. It should be fairly easy for any game developer to avoid controversies before the game is out. That being said, CD Projekt Red and many other game developers have failed miserably at that case. Which directly connects to the next story, which is CD Projekt Red will take down Cyberpunk 2077 streams and Let's Plays aired before launch, which inherently, if the only way you'd be able to stream or play a game before launch is if you got early access either through a legitimate or illegitimate way. And it at a certain point does like add a level of fairness to do something like that, to try and punish those who have cheated CD Projekt release's release schedule. On the other hand, it does just put CD Projekt Red as the actor of as the attempter to create fairness in the universe, and they will inherently get the blame and none of the reward for doing something like that. And there will be a lot of YouTubers who get mad at or scream at CD Projekt Red for taking down streams, and they will certainly construe to their audiences that they were unfairly taken down. And it certainly opens the door then if CD Projekt Red starts taking down games before their release date, who's to say that they don't accidentally take down a few after the release date and mess up. Speaking of messing up, we're not making really any progress at all. I think that literally was just the deck we were playing, so there's a decent argument to not play that deck since it's not winning. It's fairly obvious too that I've just not put in the time to build better decks. Like there almost certainly is a better deck to be had than what I'm playing as. Next we have on Steam a game called Marin, M-E-I-R-I-N, Mirin. in Fist of Fire, which seems to be a full motion video scanned, not full motion video, really. It's a photo scanned fighting game, would be the best argument. It's getting tagged as 2.5D. I would not say this is 2.5D. I'd say this is a rotoscoped. That's the real phrase. It's rotoscoped or traced fighting game. $3.59, English and Japanese. This feels like a joke game from the Japanese side. And this probably, and I'm going to have to be careful here not to just try and make this sound better than it is, because it is just a garbage game, and I don't want to include a bias, like a pro-Japanese bias, to say, oh, this is actually funny, or this is actually something I like, because I've now found out that it's probably a Japanese game. No, let's be honest, this is a garbage joke game. But it does go to show where a Japanese wacky TV mentality would go. Certainly, is that they would just have, who probably are very noticeable Japanese comedians, cross-dressing and being put in a garbage fighting game with like no real effort whatsoever to actually integrate the photos of the characters correctly or actually animate it. This is being claimed as part of the Toho project also, which inherently I feel like the Toho project is really just a project to have as many games with the word Toho on it as possible, regardless of level of skill or quality. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. Dead Island 2 is still alive, apparently. It's been probably 10 years plus since Dead Island 1, and they've made a remaster of Dead Island 1. Let's see. Of course, the spiritual successor to Dead Island, of course, is Dying Light, and the developers of Dead Island 1 went on to make Dying Light. But yeah, it's been like even really crazy. The 2014 was when the Dead Island E3 trailer here was played, and that trailer for Dead Island 1 was fairly well revered and well shot, and this trailer is just nothing. It's just a guy with earphones in, not seeing zombies, and then he gets bit, and then as he's running, he immediately gets turned into a zombie, and you just have this very grotesque looking imagery. It introduces a problem, certainly, also with the concept of with zombies, and the fact that the zombie lost all its hair immediately, because then you can't have like long-haired spooky zombie characters, although that could just be randomized too. Yeah, the end of that trailer also said it was coming out for the PlayStation 4, which, yeah, the idea of a game like Dead Island 2 coming out the idea of something like that coming out on PlayStation 4 at this point is ridiculous. There's also kind of the problem where the concept of Dead Island is that you are on a tropical island and kind of limited there, and even in Dead Island 1 you fairly quickly were not actually on an on what you would expect to feel like you'd call an island. Like the first act of Dead Island, you're on this tropical resort island. You see a lot of water. You can run out into the water to a certain invisible wall. There's actual island elements there. But once you get into the city, once you get into a city, you're very much not in that scenario anymore, and you're just in a random city that feels like any other city, and there's no real island elements or feel to it. And then once you get into the forest, you are even further away from that experience.
My sword serves as a powerful talisman.
And then once you get to the prison, which is the final area in like once you get to the prison in Dead Island, you're once again not really on an island experience. And Dead Island 2 is really showing you more on the boardwalk in LA, which at a certain point that stops becoming an island too. And so inherently the name of the game series falls apart. Where Dead Rising had kind of the opposite issue in the fact that Dead Rising had nothing to really do with a mall, and that let them go in other directions. Certainly. But it also pretty much didn't give any major direction as to where
Real battle begins.
the Dead Rising series should go or should not go. So it went everywhere. Let's hurry up here and finish this up. Here we have a game on Steam called Arise, A Simple Story, which is from Techland Publishing, which I want to check that too, but I am being very slow as far as actually looking at everything. I think Techland Publishing in particular is the developers of Dying Light, and this is definitely a different game as a publisher. They're calling it a puzzle platformer for $19.99. And yeah, it looks interesting enough to at least give a follow to. So yeah, Dying Light 2 is what is coming soon here. Plus they also have several other games they've published. For instance, Dead Island Definitive Edition and Dead Island Riptide Definitive Edition, which one do you want really? The games that are pretty much the exact same game for the exact same price. This is Dead Island Riptide, which was the spin-off version, or Dying Light. So yeah, I really don't even know what next island you would want to make a Dead Island 2 in. So inherently I would say the best move is probably to just set it in the exact same area. Why am I getting pop-ups? Why are those showing up? Like, I swear I've tried to turn those off so many times, and I'm just gonna have to turn off the Steam overlay, which probably should have been done a long time ago. See. Next we have a game on Steam here called Shadow Empire. It's a 4X game, which we don't see a lot of those games directly described as 4X games anymore. And it looks very uninteresting. $31.99 English only, ridiculously expensive. Although, in all fairness, maybe fans of 4X games would be willing to pay that much. I just don't know. Here we have a game called Jungle Town Birthday Quest, which is obviously a kids game. And it's been a long time since we've seen any kind of kids game that had any level of quality or polish to it. So I feel like this deserves a follow. $3.39 puts it at a really nice price. Why it has a third-party in-user license agreement, I don't know. Bunch of languages. It claims to have full audio for all of them, so maybe that means none of the characters actually speak at all. But I'll put that on the following list.
I soared the skies in the name of
Do I have
justice.
anything I can do? I can do that.
10 punishment.
And I can do that. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Dead Cells has surpassed 3.5 million sold ahead of the second DLC announcement, which really goes to show how Dead Cells has been an amazingly good seller. Even though I would argue there has been very little talk about it
Justice
lately.
doesn't hide in the shadows.
See if I could banish this one and get his health back. That could buy me several times. But yeah, that's not gonna happen. I don't think it matters too much either.
Your wings with prayer.
Let's see. Here we have that game, Morbid, the Seven Acolytes, which we'd seen some coverage talking about this game, but it wasn't on Steam. This was the game with a lot of pixely visuals to it, and a lot of horrific, gory creatures. The screenshots here are a little bit smaller, so they look a little bit better than being zoomed out as much as they were on the, I believe, TechRaptor article. But yeah, this looks to be about the same game I saw the review on. I can't remember if they gave it like a 7 or not. I think they gave it pretty much a 7. I'm going to put it on the follow list and see how normal people tend to respond to that. Alright, let's see. Battle again. Let's try Shadowcraft instead. See if we can take a moment to potentially disable the Steam overlay also while I'm messing with things. In-game. Enable the Steam overlay in-game. Disable that. See if that's even what the issue was. I don't know if that really even counts as the Steam overlay. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. Skyforge for the Switch launches February 4th, 2021. Which, I don't know if I've heard anything about Skyforge before. Like, it's really easy to have a screenshot like this and catch my attention as what looks like some kind of almost Magic the Gathering style fantasy game. But for all I know, it's nothing. They're saying it's a free-to-play MMO RPG, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a tower defense game, frankly. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Flower Design 2, which inherently the idea of doing a flower design, flower arrangement simulator game. I mean, in theory, this would be cheaper than actually doing flower arranging, particularly if you're going to do it like every single day, which it seems like they're saying there's a different arrangement for every single day of the year. That would be cheaper, more efficient, particularly if you're allergic to sunflowers. It's $1.19. It's English and Chinese. I can't help though think that this really is just a experimental programming project more than an actual game or simulator, or just a low effort attempt to get $1 off of people. And that really is a case of a type of game where I just don't know how you fix something like that. Like, I just don't know how you convince a player that there's enough of an experience there to justify that purchase.
Hey, how's everyone doing tonight?
Like, even if you were to put like a standard average first-person shooter game and you just needed some kind of falling action, flower arranging is just so off of the case there. It doesn't really make sense. I think you could probably have a decent scene in some kind of survival game where where I guess The Last of Us might be a good example of that. If you had a scene in The Last of Us where amongst hours and hours of horrific violence and death, you had to do a flower arrangement section as some falling action, that might be impactful, but you could only really do it once. It couldn't be this mini game. If you had like a high artsy game where it was all about art and you were doing flower arranging, maybe there's some idea there. If there was a just decorating simulator in general, maybe there's a concept there. But I think you probably are programming a technology there that is going to be so unused that it's just not efficient enough to justify. And that definitely feels like something you would more animate. If there was a animated cutscene, for instance, of in the Walking Dead Telltale games where one character did some flower arranging, that could be very impactful to do it once. I don't think impactful to have the player actually do it. In all fairness, flower arranging is not even that popular in the real world. These guys keep wrecking me. That clearly everybody knows some strategy here with these characters. And I'm getting my butt handed to me because of the strategy. And I'm not willing to investigate the strategy enough, so... Here we have a game on Steam called The Ghost Winter, which looks like it's a first-person shooter game where you're shooting dinosaurs, and you're in Russia. It feels like it's probably a Russian asset flip game for $2.99, though it only supports the English language.
Is fighting fair all you know?
I don't see enough polish here, as it is, though. So, I'm gonna say no to that. Matt has an article. The King of Fighters 15 reveal trailer is set for January 7th, 2021. So this is a tease for a tease for a tease, where there you can see the creators of the game, or just talking about the game, showing off sketches, and that's about it. And I still have yet to do enough research to figure out where in line the King of Fighters fighting game series lines up with all the other fighting series. Tech Raptor has an article here. The Silent Hill creator Kiichiro Toyama founds a new studio called Boken Game Studio. Bokeh Game Studio. Actually, not Boken. Boken is the wooden sword you practice with in Japanese. Bokeh, as I have no idea if that means anything or not. I misread it before. Let's see, is there anything? He's joined by creatives who worked on The Last Guardian and Gravity Rush, which is like a weird combination here. Silent Hill 1, theoretically, I assume he only worked on Silent Hill 1, and The Last Guardian and Gravity Rush. Pretty much just means it's a bunch of Japanese game developers who have shown that they can, to some extent, finish games, although I'm not sure that Gravity Rush from Square Enix and The Last Guardian, which may have been from Square Enix, and the Silent Hill series, which may have been from Square Enix, but I think Silent Hill is from Konami. Yeah, Silent Hill is definitely from Konami, and I think Gravity Rush is not. It might be Square Enix, but I'm not sure. So I'm underinformed here. This is a pathetic highlighting of that. What's worth mentioning, I think, now that I read this more, is that they all have split from Sony Interactive Entertainment, or no, the main characters split from Sony Interactive Entertainment, which this very well may be the first domino of many to fall, as it were. Apparently they're going to work on some kind of monster style game. But I suspect we will start to see more and more Japanese companies and Japanese developers leaving Sony Interactive Entertainment, as Sony of Japan more and more feels like it's been abandoned, which is my direct assumption is that it has been abandoned. In favor of the California office taking control. This also indicates a potential that a Silent Hill style game, or something that feels a lot like Silent Hill, or just something that feels a lot like Last Guardian or Gravity Rush, comes to Microsoft and PC. Although in all fairness, that there is a much higher chance that it will just come to Switch. Next we have the Game Haven, which is rated very positively. This is the group of lovers, for lack of a better term, working together. Single player or shared split screen. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a RPG style game that really would benefit from having co-ops. But as we're starting looking at the screenshots here, I wonder at a certain level how much of this stops being two people who are in a later stage, past the honeymoon stage of a relationship and are really in deep love, which is kind of what I'd felt like it was as far as an RPG, and how much of this really just is literally still in the honeymoon stage, or just sleeping together like wild rabbits. Like, when we look at the screenshots here, we're seeing they're playing some kind of strip poker style game. We have screenshots of picking flowers and pets, and let's see, there's them in bed as a screenshot, then them picking flowers, and then here them making out some more. So you're seeing about 1/3 of the screenshots being dedicated towards them having a real really mature sexual relationship that you just don't see in games. This also very well might be a kind of Adam and Eve story where there are no potential competitors for it, so that could be so there's potentially not going to be as much conflict in the relationship.
Father, come on.
But yeah, this does feel like it could go sleazy and lewd and not actually be much of an RPG, or it does, or that maybe they will pull it off. I mean, it's a really hard story to tell because there are definitely out there people out there that literally just don't want any adult relationships ever depicted at all. For decades in Western TV movies and novels, there's been the implication that married couples don't have sex at all, or that they only do it a few times to procreate, or they've only done it as many times as they've had kids, which is inherently a toxic message to send out there, because it is often, for many couples, incredibly difficult to conceive, and they are potentially even to the point where they don't even actually want to have sex. They are potentially forcing themselves to have sex on schedules because they want a baby that much.
Hey, how's everyone doing tonight?
So yeah, it's a potential different route this game Haven is going, particularly when this is, I think, more of a Western company than we would call a Japanese company in general. We can see that this developer also has a game called Squid's Odyssey. They also made Fury, which came out in 2016, and then the DLC came out in 2017. And that was a very kind of anime fighting style game. One of the things I'd say about Fury is that while it is a game I definitely want to play, it is also a game that is fairly light on story and fairly heavy on fighting difficulty mechanics. So if this RPG turns out to be very difficult also, that sets up a scenario where they may just not have the difficulty balance that one would like to have.
This isn't weird, but can I get your autograph? You're gonna die.
There we go. Next, we have a sharp twist in the other direction. We have My Universe Pet Clinic Cats and Dogs, which is almost certainly a mobile game that has been converted to Steam. Although, in all fairness, it does not look like it's been done poorly. This tagged as a medical sim, which I was misreading as medieval sim. $26.99, bunch of languages. The problem here is when you start to look at this bundle, and you can see there's a My Universe school teacher, My Universe fashion boutique, My Universe My Baby, My Universe cooking star restaurant, and each one of these is ridiculously overpriced, and I just cannot justify supporting this level of price gouging from Microids as the publisher. That just does not sit well with me, particularly when you're targeting kids and who would be inherently using their parents' money.
What do you think you're doing? As my guitar gently beats.
So yeah, I'm not gonna put that on the fall list for that reason. It's just too overpriced. Next, we have a Gamatsu article, Corpse Party Blood covered, repeated fear for the PS4 and Switch has some new character portraits unveiled. So, seems like they potentially are making a remake of a older Corpse Party game
Do you know
with new characters. Which I may get into the Corpse Party series at some point, but I have yet to do something. Let's do that. And then hit that. Hit that. Go and hit that. Next, we have a game called Proven, a math RPG, which that concept falls apart miserably in my mind. A, because who wants to play an entire RPG based around math, and frankly, a lot of this seems like maybe you'll have some math problems in the dialogue, but the actual gameplay mechanic is just standard RPG Maker experience. There might be an interesting concept to see. You just see one here, true or false, is this correct, in a math question, whereas the actual gameplay seems to be just standard RPG Maker fare. $4.49. I guess maybe if you made a system where if you overkilled a character doing more damage than exactly what is needed, perhaps that would recoil and hurt you, and so then there would be a level of math one would need to do. But even in that scenario, you probably would do fairly fine not playing around with that gameplay element and just taking the damage and moving on, which it would probably be fairly easy to do close to enough damage, depending on how you balance the game like that, so that an overkill recoil system wouldn't actually matter. You could potentially have enemies that get double damage if you do damage that ends with like the number 2, 3, 4, or 5, and then triple damage if it ends with 9 or 0. Things like that. But even a system like that would probably just not be interesting enough to stick with. You pretty much would have to have boss characters that acted that way, and eliminate a lot of the grindy smaller characters to have any kind of special abilities. Next, we have a game on Steam called The Arena Guy, which is a low-effort top-down twin-stick shooter for $2.99. Bunch of languages. Nothing really needs to be said about that. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam here called War Identity, which is already mixed, and looks to me like it's just a zombie first-person shooter game. Although it does seem like it has more customization and depictions than you would normally see, although maybe this is an indication that they just asset flipped a bunch of hero skins and the actual game is kind of nothing, and there might only be a couple levels. It's free to play with in-app purchases, and it's online PvP, so that definitely takes it out of my consideration. Next, we have a game on Steam called Oniria Crimes. I assume that's what that is. Looks like it's a blocky point-and-click adventure game, which I'm not sure I can really get along with that idea.
Is fighting and despair all you know? May eternal peace
Yeah.
be yours.
They're saying this is a crime investigation point-and-click noir game, but the visuals here just do not line up with that at all. $19.99 is also way too expensive. It's published by Badland Publishing. What else have they published? And I'm looking at every publisher today, which probably just means I've, at this point, forgotten everything. Anima Gate of Memories. At one point, I was considering that for the fall list, and it didn't make it, I guess. AWE, which I guess I was considering that. Then a lot of other things that either I never saw or had no interest in. There is kind of a running theme here, though, of games that look weird and just feel a little too off and don't make sense. So yeah, I'm not gonna put that on the fall list, although probably should. Here's that game Fogs, which at least here this does show you that it is effectively a cat dog, although it's two dogs on both sides. And maybe we can actually figure out what we're actually doing here. Yeah, it does seem like it's a puzzle adventure game where you are solving little adventure puzzles. It doesn't feel too different from that game Snake Way. So yeah, I'm gonna put that on the fall list. Probably immediately to jump to the wish list. Online co-op for a game like that does seem a little weird. And I bet this publisher hasn't published anything else. Kingdom Two Crowns, which looks very much like stolen art from the Bloodlands. Interesting. No, Bloodborne. No, I don't know. Maybe they did a crossover. I'm gonna not say it's stolen art or care. I'm gonna say it must have been either heavily inspired by the character of Bloodborne, or there is a crossover experience happening here. The actual game itself does not really look like that character. But that does certainly look very similar to that character. And yeah, I don't know what to say there. Like, clearly there would have been a copyright claim if there was a problem, but that does feel very odd to have a character in an art style that just strikes me as bloodstained or whatever that game is. Let's see. Let's see if we can figure this out better in a second. Next, we have a game on Steam called Naginata, which I believe is what these weapons are called. The long staff, usually not magical and capable of shooting beams. Seems like this is a fairly simplistic beat 'em up game, though. It's free. Bunch of languages. Let's play this. Hit that and that.
Into the wrong forest, friend.
Yeah. Let's I'm really not making any progress here at all. today, but
Now, if you would please look to your right. Any questions?
do we have anything we want to evolve and attack? No. So here's Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Here's this character. You see she's got a sword. You see there's a bunch of rose-like flowers or imagery behind her. You can see there's a blue long ribbon. You can see a pale face, that haircut. And you can see a very distinctive tattoo on the chest, for lack of a better description. So then let's go back to this image here. It's totally the same image, but not the exact same image by any means, but it is a same character. And then all the screenshots of this game seems to have nothing to do with that. So what in the world? Why is that image in this completely different game? Why is this character in this completely different game? Seems to be like a long list of games. Let's look at this publisher and developer. It's published by Raw Fury, Stumpy Squid, Fury Studios, and Coatsink. Bloodstain is published by Artplay and 505 Games. It just seems so weird that you would be able to do something like this. Maybe the artist worked on both games. It seems so insanely weird. See if there's anything in the chats. Some negative reviews. Apparently lots of bugs. Well, I am weirdly confused here. Very, very confused. I don't know how you could have two characters from completely different companies being depicted, when also fairly obviously that this character is the unique character for this game. Unless perhaps they stole the art. That would be the real crazy part, is if it was actually the much more popular, much more well-known developer that stole the art from a smaller developer. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But then why wouldn't there have been a story around that at that point? Also, I would argue that the graphics, even the old graphics before they were redone, looked way bigger. Now these screenshots are gonna load. It looked way better and way bigger than the other game. Yeah, and I still desperately would like to own this game and play it. It's just, yeah, another game that's just too expensive. Like, there's a lot more characters in this game than just the main character. Frankly, to its own little detriment, I feel like there's probably too many people and too much focus on different people, so that you probably don't have enough of a character development for the first game for the first character, the main character. Well, I'm wasting time, so let's move forward. Next, we have a game on Steam called Fox's Holiday, which looks to me like it's probably a Chinese, simplistic, they're calling it an action RPG game. I don't think it really is even that. English is not supported, 59 cents. If I was to guess, it's probably closer to just a kinetic visual novel. Although at a certain point you just also have games where you just click on things and things happen and that's about it. Next we have a game on Steam called Control Over, which they're calling a text-based 2D thriller, which I wouldn't call this inherently text-based. You are moving around somewhat and talking to people. Definitely looks like it's a horror game. Definitely feels like it's either a Chinese or a Japanese game. If it's a Chinese game, it's nicely polished for a Chinese game. If it's a Japanese game, it's moderately acceptably polished, but a different art style. English is not supported, 809. Korean. Oh, I forgot that option too. It's a Korean game. Okay. Yeah, in a weird way, you can kind of generalize and say that a good Chinese game or a mediocre Japanese game might very well be a Korean game in visuals. Also, there's some elements here that kind of highlight that this is a Korean game in the fact that you're not seeing anime style animation. You're seeing a white-haired character with blue eyes instead of just black-haired, brown eyes Japanese people. Yeah. So there are some indications there. And yeah, of course I might actually win at some of these games if I paid attention to them. Inherently, I'm more and more running into the issue of the conflict between trying to pay attention to Shadowverse and actually winning, and failing miserably even when I do pay attention to win, and covering the video game news, which failing inherently to cover that at all.
And to be blessed.
Need a loan? I lost. You can never have too many. Need a loan?
Avenge me, comrades!
Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called 3 Minute Heroes, which is probably a lot faster, longer than Half Minute Hero per level. It seems like, though, this is kind of more of just a tower defense game. They're calling it a strategy card game, though. Kind of a Plants vs. Zombies. There might be something to this. It's early access. It's $13.99. It's English and Korean. That price is really high. It being in early access is questionable. But there might be something there, so I'll put it on the follow list. Just getting nowhere. Next, we have a game on Steam called the Thought Police Hotline Episode 1, which inherently episodic is going to be a problem. This looks to me like this is a fairly badly animated visual novel. Now, I imagine if it's called the Thought Police Hotline, the idea is everybody dresses in the same outfits and everybody's bland and boring, and there's a whole commentary here on controlling the thinking patterns. They're calling it a comedy visual novel, comedy sci-fi visual novel. So yeah, and you're just seeing a bunch of people, and that's probably it. Yeah. $5.99 for one episode, English only. Don't see enough there to justify even putting that on the follow list. Like, if somehow this comedy sci-fi visual novel actually came out and turned out to be something, and people which for visual novels that's highly unlikely to ever happen. But if it did manage to catch enough people's attention, I might consider it. Also, if it comes out with like an episode 2 or an episode 3, I'll reevaluate it when I see those episodes. But there is also that high chance that it will never come out with an episode 2. Gamatsu has an article here. The Neptunia Virtual Stars DLC character Kazuna AI launches December 10th in Japan. So, Virtual Stars showing up in the Neptunia DLC characters showing up in the Neptunia Virtual Stars game, which there's a small chance that that would never come to the West just because of the licensing, but I would also argue there's a chance very well that it would come out in the US, because another story we're going to talk about today is that a Neptunia game is coming to the West, and most of them have come to the West. Arguably too many Neptunia games have been made in general. Next we have a game here on Steam called Babel, which seems to be some kind of tower defense concept using like circuitry or very zoomed out imagery of some sort. They're calling it a base building military game for $4.24. English and Chinese. Yeah, and there's just nothing visually appealing to these little round dots. Right, so if I play this and play this and then play this, and then I can attack here and here. We already talked about that. Gamatsu has a better article here talking about how the Siren and Gravity Rush creator Kiichiro Tomoya leaves Sony Interactive in Japan and establishes Bokeh Games. It's better in my opinion because here you have him listed in all the games he's worked on. Silent Hill 1999, Siren 2, Siren New Translation, Gravity Rush Remastered, and Gravity Rush 2. Kazunobu Sato was the lead character designer in Siren 2, so you can see that they worked together. The only thing he also split on was Puppeteer as the lead game designer and producer as The Last Guardian, and then Junya Okura was the lead game designer for Siren 2, Siren New Translation, Gravity Rush, Gravity Remastered, and Gravity Rush 2. So he worked on everything that Kenichiro Tomoya worked on also. So these three people clearly have a decent working experience with each other, and so that establishes a good start. One would assume it would be very weird if these two characters actually hated, these three people actually hated each other and decided to go into business with each other. So one has to assume that they have a good, productive working relationship, which you have to be careful with how you describe a good working relationship, because people can work very well together and accomplish nothing, and that's not a productive working relationship. So sometimes it's a little bit better to have characters that butt heads, so they actually finish a project. Seriously, have I gotten a single victory today? Let's see, play ranked rotation, Havencraft 2. Try different deck. Here we have a job listing for Eno Games as a game designer in Hamburg, Germany. So we've started to see a few more job listings lately as we approach the new year. I imagine it's not as many as it was last year by any means, but some people do seem to think that they can be hiring. Although, you know, there's no direct equation to listing a job listing and actually hiring anyone. Next, we have a game on Steam called Shiren the Wanderer, the Tower of Fortune, and the Dice of Fate, which just visually looks fairly interesting in this trailer. It definitely also feels more like an RPG game, though. So, yeah. It's questionable. $17.99, English, Japanese, Chinese. A game like this does have that 8-bit graphics problem, certainly. But I'm willing to overlook it in this case and put it on the follow list. We see it's very positive. It's from Spike Chunsoft. CEO of YouTube, Susan Wojcicki, tweeted out something 20 hours ago. At YouTube, we've been looking closely on how our policies and products are working for everyone, specifically for the Black community. Today, we're sharing an update, which inherently it always has to have that SJW bend on it, where the admission here is Susan Wojcicki would not have done anything to improve the policies and products for people if it wasn't affecting some special minority class that they're obsessed with, which there's plenty of minority classes that they are not obsessed with and that they don't care about one bit. But yeah, at the very least, that is YouTube related somewhat. Posts, which we very rarely get any posts on Twitter for Susan Wojcicki, and half the time it's only partially or not at all related to YouTube. I still feel like she's failed miserably just in general to be the leader that YouTube needs. And sure, maybe there is no leader out there that YouTube needs, but she hasn't really done anything that has impressed me. I thought I clicked on that article, but no, I clicked on some article, so well, you know what, I'll just open it up again and click on the article. I can solve that problem fairly easily. So here it is, updates on our efforts to make YouTube more inclusive. Let's see, let's go ahead and click that. Blah 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 blah. What are you really doing? Apparently, step 1 is removing harmful and hateful comments. Censorship. Yes, that's the solution of all SJWs. Keeping comments respectful. So that they're gonna start posting a thing where if your comments seem disrespectful, mean, hateful, they're going to ask you to edit it or post anyway, and almost certainly people will instantaneously be trained to post anyway. I don't feel like there is a single person that's going to change their mind in half a second of posting something. And inherently, this doesn't seem like they've so far changed the policy around a YouTube content creator's channel potentially getting community guideline strikes based on what one of their fans comments in some video, where the YouTube content creator is being held responsible for actions that they cannot control and did not create. So if this was in part a solution to say, hey, we realized that previous policy was total BS and ridiculous, then that would be a somewhat good thing in my book, but I bet it isn't. I imagine this is just going to be more punishments for anybody who violates what YouTube doesn't like, whereas also almost certainly this algorithm that detects whether you're being mean-spirited or not will not detect it in a fair, apolitical manner. Here they're highlighting the fact that they terminated 1.8 million channels since early 2019, and they've removed 46 times as many comments. So it's just really nothing. They've created a survey, which is the most limp-wristed solution to anything ever. Always is we created a survey. There is a certain level of harassment I am certain that minorities who put their faces on YouTube get. Almost certainly. But I will also fully argue that there is a certain level that some YouTube creators who are minorities assume that they are not getting as many views or that they're getting more hate comments than an average white cis male would get on YouTube. And there has to be an accounting for there are just people with chips on their shoulder for many different reasons, and you cannot kowtow to someone who is perceiving being mistreated when they are being treated as poorly as everyone else, which is the situation on YouTube, is that everybody gets a lot of hate comments, everybody gets a lot of spam comments, and it's always been that case. It's always been an issue that has been under addressed and at this point probably cannot be fixed. They've tried it multiple things and failed multiple times to address the level of mean-spirited comments that show up on YouTube to no avail, including the real name policy, including many other things. And in all fairness, the mean-spirited comments on YouTube are probably very much in line with what you would get on Twitter or Reddit, anywhere where you're not directly talking to friends and family. Let's see, what else? Nope, nothing else. So their solution is more censorship and self-censorship, which only gets you so far. It really only gets you so far, and at the same level as it is still just a direct attack on free speech in one way, from many people's opinion. Inherently, the onus should not be on YouTube stopping people from saying mean things. The onus on YouTube should be YouTube offering an option that is opt-in to content creators to not see comments, which in all fairness, most content creators probably aren't reading the comments anyways. But they have plenty of filters already on comments for the back end of YouTube, where you can go through your comments and try and respond to them. It would be very easy to simply have a checkbox that says eliminate anything that has something that we think is mean-spirited, or that there are already rules against chat and block lists and things that you either opted in or opted out of. I think you would default opted in too. Twitch support is testing a new community challenge called Boost the Stream. With a limited number of small channels, communities can pull channel points to help streamers increase their visibility on Twitch, which inherently I feel like this idea might be interesting, but it is little cronyism once again. A boost places the stream in highly visible parts of Twitch so more people can discover awesome up-and-coming streamers, which means basically the really successful streamers can boost their friends or people that are part of their same secret like back-end company that's producing, I imagine, a decent number of streamers. This is the concept sounds positive until you realize just how incredibly anti-consumer it is for Twitch to allow a select few to pick the winners and losers, even in the low tier of streaming, because now you are not getting natural results, you're getting curated results when you go and look for a game. And streamers now will more and more become successful not because they're actually good at streaming, but because they have secret support, which is exactly what people hate with YouTube. Like, people hate the fact that you go to that homepage full of suggestions and it's constantly suggesting the same 10 to 100 big YouTubers. Like, I'm constantly getting suggestions for Red Letter Media and PewDiePie, and in all fairness, I've watched those things, and so I've brought it on myself, but I am not getting any recommendations at all for any kind of small YouTube content creator, anybody that would be like Red Letter Media and talk about movies or old bad movies. I don't get recommended even Markiplier because I haven't watched Markiplier, but I constantly get PewDiePie. That makes no sense. I definitely never get recommended any small video game streamers or anything like that. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. PlayStation 4 share Facebook content is reportedly being deleted without warning. A fallout between Sony and Facebook may be the cause. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how many people were sharing things to Facebook. TechRaptor has an article here. Red Dead Revolver and other lost PS2 demos have been found and preserved. Which, okay. Nice to see some video game preservation happening.
Oh, why'd it have to be a clear day?
Next, we have a game on Steam here called Trials of the Argolis, which has a weird art style. Certainly not sure if this is an actual game. They're calling it Souls-like. $13.99 English only. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is an asset flip game or a small little indie game, or if there's something that's like really well programmed here, but there's just some lower graphics, or if maybe this is even potentially a mobile game. I guess all I can do is put it on the follow list and see what people have to say if anybody reviews it. Okay. This. And then this.
The real battle begins.
still don't even see the beginning of the end here. Here we have a game on Steam called Suzerain, which is probably a political simulator. I don't know what Suzerain means. It feels like a word I've heard before. Text-based roleplay political game for $11.99, English only. Guess I can put it on the follow list. That'd be a hard sell, certainly.
I envy you.
Let's see. Try Shadowcraft here. Next, we have a game on Steam called Afen Fall, which they're tagging as a parkour, first-person, single-player game. There's definitely some visual polish here, but I'm not really seeing what the gameplay really is. Like, it does kind of feel like it's some kind of magic world with some parkour elements. There is a certain idea certainly there. Like the idea of having magic with parkour makes parkour a little bit more reasonable, gives you maybe some outs when you mess up a jump, and it gives you something to do different compared to like the shooting elements in Mirror's Edge. Also, magic / alchemy being a thing in the world changes the world, so you're not playing a game that has to contrive a solution as to why you're parkouring so much, because they really did bend over backwards in the first Mirror's Edge to create this totalitarian China-like country that is monitoring everyone to the point where the only way to get any communication across to a different person without being monitored is to have runners running on the rooftops of the these buildings, being chased by police. Which still, that will be a contrived situation in almost any story. If you're going to parkour, is that you would be running on the rooftops or running around places you're not supposed to be, doing actions that normal people would not do in the form of parkour. Let's see. TechRaptor has an article here. Phoenix Labs Dauntless in Growth. This feels like this is more of a interview than an actual announcement of any video games, though. So check out this article if you're interested. I'm not particularly interested in Phoenix Lab or Dauntless. According to EA, it's Dragon Age Day. I'm fairly certain I played one Dragon Age game, but I only pretty much remember this character and maybe this guy. The rest of these characters may have played a role, but they seem to be fairly forgettable. And honestly, I'm not sure I even made it to the end of Dragon Age, whatever Dragon Age I've played. Let's see. Let's do that. Didn't do that.
Coming for detestable.
And then return. What they're not doing is announcing anything Dragon Age related, however. So don't get your hopes up that a new Dragon Age game is coming out. if anything, EA is more and more becoming nostalgic for its old games as it more and more becomes incapable of making a new game that anybody wants to play. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Enrollment has opened for the Apple fee reducing small big business program, bringing it down to 15% from 30%, which, okay. We'll see how many people get rejected on that. It is also Friday, and I have yet to see any major, like, adult game content. So we'll start the countdown and see if we see any next week. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it even takes 2 weeks, since we're approaching the Christmas holidays, for them to get approved. Let's see.
Laces, everyone. Work starts at sunset.
Coming for
Let's
you.
do that. And then so evolve that.
I must bring the meal before it grows cold. So much work to
That.
do.
You crusty horseshoe. Detestable.
And hit that, I suppose. Next, we have a game on Steam called Anime Play Life Unlimited, which A, does not really have anime in it. Like, it's a bit of a stretch to call this an anime style. And B, seems to be really just a bunch of asset flips, and maybe they're even trying to put a game in here, but the game itself seems to be at best a life simulator, at worst just a assortment of random activities. It's $17.99 English only with a third-party EULA, which, yeah, there's nothing there that seems to line up with anything you'd want to buy. TechRaptor has an article here. The Facebook antitrust investigation eyes Oculus after devs accusation. Software developers are accusing Facebook of a copy, acquire, and kill strategy to undermine competition in the VR market. Developers say Facebook is using its market dominance to steal ideas from them and making rival apps harder to operate and use on Oculus platforms. Okay, well, that could be just blatant false accusations, or that could be totally accurate, and I honestly would not be surprised if it's totally accurate when you look at just like the history of Facebook in general. That entire concept is kind of nothing. Like, it's stolen, or allegedly stolen. Although I don't even know if we really need the allegedly in that case. It seems fairly obvious that a lot of the concepts of Facebook, if none of the code, were copied.
I'm coming for you.
You're too strong.
See, the thing about the Facebook blog, specifically talking about how we're going to try and reduce the number of hateful comments, even the title of it saying we're trying to create a more inclusive environment is so just SJW that it turns off half your audience in the first title read. Like, it would be so much more accurate and logical to say introducing a new methods to attempt to reduce hateful comments. Like, that's all you really need to say is focus on hateful comments. Get away from this SJW mentality of inclusivity being the goal always, and inclusivity being in their minds a world where people never say anything negative particularly to minorities, regardless of whether the minorities need something negative told to them, or regardless of whether someone is saying something that is very true. In my opinion, inclusivity cannot be boiled down and redefined as a world where only positive things are spoken. That's not inclusivity. That's just censorship on a different end. And frankly, you're hurting content creators at a certain level if you do just start censoring all the negative comments regardless. Like you're creating this false reality, you're creating a unhelpful narrative, you're just lying to them, you're bootlicking, you're kowtowing to creators, you're making them feel good, but that won't make them better creators if they're not hearing the negative responses, and it won't make them smarter, happier creators in the long run, because they won't get more views. So they're at odds with their own goal. As a small YouTube content creator, if I had 100% of haters coming to my channel every time I streamed, every time a video came up, and it was just 100% downvotes, and everybody hated it, and everybody was just calling me names and being mean to me as much as possible, saying they slept with my mother and things like that, saying they slept with my father. Hey, let's not gender it. There's a level there where either I need to learn what did I do to inspire such hate, which maybe I wouldn't even really care that much, because I really shouldn't care about what random strangers on the internet have to say about me or say to me. But also, there's a level there where I could say, you know what? This is better than what I used to get, which is what I'm getting right now, which is no passion at all. No comments, no views, nothing like that. No thumbs up. So I'd much rather have an audience of loyal 1,000 to 10,000 haters, 100% haters, watching my stuff, hating it, saying it's garbage, than I would want to stay in the situation where I am right now. And in my experience, the percentages don't really break out that way. You don't get 100% hating. Even if you do like the most vile, repulsive content at all, you still get about 50% of people who like that content, ironically or otherwise. And in my experience, I've gotten, I would argue, close to 99.5% positivity when I do get comments. My audience is as small and inconsistent as it may be, has been incredibly positive. And the people that don't like my content, which might be the vast majority of people who see my content, don't bother to comment at all. They just move on. I seem to be getting victories here simply on disconnects more than anything. But my network lag issue has still really not been an issue. Thank goodness for that. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Chanuki Sunset, where Chanukis are the little raccoons, Japanese word for raccoons, and you're doing a surfing, skateboarding style game with some kind of collectibles. It looks interesting. $14.99 is a little expensive, English only, but it looks interesting enough to go on the follow list. TechRaptor has an article here. The Persona 4 mod restores Yosuke's romance, which I'm not sure why Yosuke's romance would be missing if it weren't a case that Yosuke's romance was either gay or he transitioned genders at some point. Yeah. Let's see. A gay romance in Persona 4 that no one knew about until it was discovered that he had lines admitting his affections to a player in the PC release. So there was a gay romance, apparently not in the Japanese version or in the Western PC release, except for they left some comments down here. And that does feel like that's kind of in line with what would likely have happened, because in particular Persona has been attacked by, mainstream video game journalists, quote unquote, for some of the content in Persona 3, in the way some of the story was depicted and the way some of the story was translated, which at a certain level it is those attacks and those articles that came out, of which there wasn't more than a couple even at the time, on Persona 3, did kind of boil down to an argument that they demanded that teenagers be written and that artists write characters exactly the way SJWs want them to be written always, and write scenarios exactly the way they would want scenarios to happen, which oddly made this scenario that claims that art cannot be or depict repulsiveness or people acting incorrectly against some moral arbitrator's decisions, and that's just not something art can ever agree to, frankly. It's insane to say an author can't touch upon subjects or have characters do something that is against norm or against what would be acceptable. At a certain point, then you are arguing that you could go as far as saying it's an only maybe half a step away from arguing that the Bible should not depict the crucifixion of Jesus, because crucifixion and corporal punishment is unacceptable by many people's standards. Or that Lolita is a book that should not exist or be allowed to exist because it's a story of a pedophile being a false narrator telling his romanticized, deluded vision of what occurred. I mean, it pretty much ruins all art everywhere, frankly, because there's literally no way to have any kind of different story that isn't just a like kindergarten's tale of all the friends came together and then they had cake and then they sung songs. Like, unless you want all stories to be bland and saccharine and predictable, you cannot go into this idea that artists are not allowed to touch upon certain subjects, regardless of what the subjects are. You can't have the movie Roots, because all Roots is the depiction of the horrors of slavery. So yeah, that was a dumb attack, but the problem inherently with Japanese developers is that they hear these messages, particularly from mainstream game journalists, and they take them to heart too much. And because they take these messages to heart way too much, they end up censoring themselves, and that is just the general Japanese personality, is that they will just kowtow to authority always. So that has hurt the creation of several Japanese games in a very negative way, since it is also the mainstream video game journalists who are SJWs. Those are also exactly the people who would never play a Japanese game in general at all. They are only playing Persona because it's their job. They will not give it an extra time. They will not ever fairly review it and give it a positive review if it deserves. So there is, for lack of a better term, a obvious and blatant anti-Japanese mentality. I think it probably expands to just an anti-foreigner mentality that is implied in there, because anti-foreigner might be the wrong word. It's an anti-different culture. It's a, as much as SJWs talk about inclusion, they actually don't want to include other people's opinions or cultures at all. So they want only Western games and games developed by Western companies to succeed, particularly in part because they have much more influence and over the Western game developers, to the point where you get The Last of Us 2 and Life is Strange series, and games that are just completely flooded with SJW mentality. But boy, man, it has today really been a case of just going back around in loops to the same old problems that are just increasingly hurting the video game industry. But I don't feel like I'm talking about these unprompted. Each of these incidences were based on a news story. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Blast Brawl 2, which looks like it's a player versus player game. Looks like it's a little visually polished, but it also has some darkness, and it's $8.49, and I don't think there's really a single player experience to have here. Beat 'em up side scroller. Yeah, I just don't see enough of a gameplay element that attracts me, and maybe there is some single player content there, but I'm not sure. Let's see.
It was nearly done. The real battle begins.
Sorry up. Tech Raptor has an article here. Chuck Norris is the newest World of Tanks edition, which is kind of surprising to even hear anything new about World of Tanks. Also, I feel like this is probably a stock image of Chuck Norris from perhaps 10 years ago. I feel like if you got a normal image of Chuck Norris from today, he'd probably look fairly old. Although, looking at his face, he is seemingly very, very freckled and sun exposed. And he's wearing a thick coat, probably to hide a aging gut line. But yeah, Chuck Norris is old, so and in a funny way, I would argue that there's been a failure to find like a new Chuck Norris type character, and a failure to find any any of the more eclectic personalities. Perhaps that is because they are very unique style characters. I know that one of the Supernatural actors, after 15 years of working at Supernaturals, is going to try and reboot Walker, Texas Ranger, I believe. And so that'll be interesting to see if that actually succeeds. Alright, at this point it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. So I'm just going to stop playing Shadowverse because we're not getting done with that any time fast. Like, in theory, if I could get one more random victory, I would be done with everything, but in practicality, connecting, even just wasting time and connecting to accounts and then completely ignoring them is just too much effort. Tick Raptor has an article here. Magicka creators Arrowhead Games announces their next title. It's a next-gen co-op shooter. They also made Gauntlet and Helldivers and the Showdown effect. So, okay. New games beginning to be announced. Here, Gama Sutra has the article. Payday maker Starbreeze has settled debts with a majority of creditors. Oops. Excuse me. But, yeah. So, Starbreeze in particular feels like a very badly run company that either is doing something genius that I can't understand with their finances, or is attempting to do something very scammy that I don't understand, or just doing an extremely bad job in general of running finances. Next we have a game on Steam here called The Orange Rice, which looks like it's just a platforming game with not really great graphics. It's $8.99 English and Spanish Latin America. Nothing interesting there. Let's see, here we have a game on Steam called is that how you spell Bohemian Rhapsody? But it was BE, so I guess it's Bahamian Rhapsody, as in the Bahamas? A visual novel, dating sim. Seems like all the characters feel like they are fairly drawn the same way. You have a red-headed lady, and then you have a brown-headed lady and a darker brown-headed lady. They all seem to be fairly wide-hipped, kind of small-breasted, very thin waist. It's tagged LGBTQ. How many potential lesbian visual novels from the West have I on my wish list? An 18 plus patch for free also. Yeah, I'm gonna put this on the fall list, but I don't know. I really don't know if there's actually enough of a game here. I'd like to see the reviews on that. Although at a certain point, Westerners may very much appreciate visual novels that are only 20 minutes that have 6 nude sex scenes, compared to the Japanese appreciation of visual novels where they want 80,000 words and for it to last 60 to 200 hours for the same amount of nude sex scenes. Although I'm not sure if modern Japanese players even want that, or if this has just more become a tradition. Next we have a game on Steam here called Deadly Dozen Pacific Theater, which kind of looks like a generation or two behind first-person shooter. It could very easily just be an asset flip game. It's $6.69 English only. It's being published by Ziggurat, and I feel like I recognize Ziggurat. Yeah, they're the publisher that has published Blood Rain. Ziggurat's kind of inconsistent on quality. Alright, well, I'll put this on the follow list. We can see that this is a 2002 game, so, but it also isn't really a relevant game, even though it has come out in 2002. We also have another old game called Bop and Wrestle, which seems to be just a pixely wrestling game for $3.34, English only. Nothing there. No reason to put that on the follow list. Here we have also Cycle Mania, which looks like a cycling game from 1994, $3.34. Yeah, if these were games that I recognized and I had played back in the day, I would potentially consider it, but they aren't. Here we have Nine Witches Family Disruption, which is tagged as a point-and-click adventure game, which it feels definitely like a Maniac Mansion style game. It's a little too pixely for my liking, but I might be able to overlook it. $15.99 is also very expensive though, so I'm gonna put that on the follow list. We're having quite the list here of games that are really, really overpriced today. TechRaptor has an article here. Persona 5 Strikers hits the West on February 23rd. So yet another Persona game is coming to the West. Almost certainly all the Persona games are coming to the West. Although, once again, perhaps with some censorship. Next we have a game called Conflict of the Universe, which looks to me like it's an asset flip space game of some sort. It's early access, $3.74. PvE arcade game. Yeah, I don't see anything interesting there. Here we have a game called iGuide Kenosis VR, which sounds like it's a VR game where you can wander around and see some ancient history. The Kenosis Palace in Crete, which very possibly doesn't exist anymore. Requires VR, is $15.99. It's English and Greek. This might be interesting if you were taking a Greek class and a college had a VR lab, which honestly, if I was a college, I probably would build some VR labs as a way of having something that could not be offered online, or something that felt like you were actually, your tuition was actually going towards the education of students instead of the tuition just going in the pockets of the dean and maybe some of the other tenured professors. It's an interesting idea. The problem with something like this though is you put this on the fall list and it very possibly is never going to leave the fall list because of it being VR only, and it also not really being justifiable to play. Next we have a game on Steam called Puko, which looks to me like it's a laser, maybe box puzzle pushing laser game. Yeah, $3.59 feels like the right price here. Also, compared to a lot of box puzzle games and laser games, at least this one seems to have a bit of a personality and some characters. So I have to applaud that, although I just don't see a reason to actually play that game. Gamatsu has an article here. Eurokill, the culminative games, has been delayed to 2021 and adds a PlayStation 5 and Switch versions. I hadn't heard of any announcements here. Yeah, for as much as I complain about Japanese companies making announcements about announcements about announcements about announcements, there still seems to be a decent number of Japanese games I miss, either because Gamatsu didn't cover them the first time, or I just missed them because I've forgotten about them or didn't see the article. See, next we have a game here that's all Asian characters, and a lot of this seems to be kind of missing data, so I don't know if it was taking a sweet time to load up or what. This seems to be kind of a dungeon game more than what you'd call like an RPG game. But yeah, I don't see anything interesting here. English, $9.99, Japanese. Yep. If anything, I would say it feels at most like Zombies Ate My Neighbors or Gauntlet game where you just have to collect a bunch of keys. Next, we have a game on Steam called Ricky Did Nothing Wrong, which is probably a phrase that always means somebody did something wrong. Seems to be a Spanish-written game, a poorly animated point and click. It's free. English and Spanish. I don't know if it really supports English. But yeah, apparently you can play it in English. Just don't think there's enough of a game there to justify playing a free point and click like that. Next we have a game on Steam called Meatball, which seems to be a orientation gravity puzzle game where you're trying to get a meatball, I guess, into the final ring. 84 cents, bunch of languages, 10 achievements. Doesn't look interesting enough for my time. Next we have an all Asian titled game, which is almost certainly a Chinese RPG, and unfortunately they all look the same. It's free to play. It's an MMORPG Chinese game. We're still seeing these on a weekly basis, but we're not seeing a ton of them either, so at a certain level we're probably moving in the right direction. Next we have a game on Steam here called Football Girl, which this is just low effort asset flips of models, and it doesn't seem like it actually is a soccer game by any means. It seems like it's just a low effort physics game that when you're actually even playing the game, you don't even get to see the customized character you're looking at. Which this definitely is of the level of quality of a game that where you would expect it just to have nudity in it, and it doesn't. So maybe there's finally been some curation going on. This is 59 cents, and you can definitely see the graphics look pretty terrible. It's English, Japanese, and Chinese, so take your pick as to who's guilty of making that one. Next we have The Adventures of Sadokar Chapter 1, which looks like a RPG Maker game. And yeah, it just looks like all the other RPG Maker games. $11.99, although apparently $11 for only Chapter 1, so an incredibly overpriced RPG Maker game also. Next we have Amulet of Time, Shadow of La Rochelle from HH Games, which we haven't seen too many hidden object games in the past couple of weeks. So HH Games is bringing out another hidden object type adventure game. And $6.29 is definitely more reasonable than what Big Fish Games tends to release as. And I haven't seen anything from Big Fish Games in a while either. Next we have a game on Steam called Leaf Blower Revolution, which seemingly you just run around and blow leaves, maybe for a score increase, free to play, with then some premium pack for $21.24, English only. Yeah, this just seems too simplistic to buy. Alright, let's at this point start covering the news only, because we're approaching 3 hours, and then I may just have some games left over. left over on Monday. I wanted to mention this. Major Nelson tweeted out this game called Runeverse, or Runeverse, is now available for Windows 10, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. This looks like a Japanese RPG game that I recall hearing about before. And it definitely caught my interest, so I was going to investigate and see if that is on Steam, which I guess inherently I can do that right now, can't I? It's on Google Play also. Yeah, it did just come out on Steam. And then when we actually see it, it is an RPG game that looks a lot like RPG Maker, although I would argue there might be a few elements here that kind of stand out as not being RPG Maker. Like this, whatever that is, looks different. And 5 characters following you feels a little bit different. And yeah, this interface feels a little bit different. And this interface definitely feels different. I'm going to put this on the follow list, but inherently a game like this may fall out of favor very quickly on the follow list. English and Japanese, $13.29. Gamma Sutra has a job listing for Gameforge as a lead game designer in Karlsruhe, Germany. I don't know how you'd pronounce that. Karlsruhe, Germany. Let's see. Maybe a lot of these articles are going to be the exact same articles so that I can close a bunch of them. Gematsu has a space-time fantasy MMORPG called Chrono Odyssey being announced for consoles, PC, iOS, and Android. It's from Grand Saga developer InPixel. This looks like some very hyper-realistic graphics and kind of a Joan d'Arc character. See if we can skip through this and see what's going to be depicted here. A lot of interesting imagery. This reminds me that there was a game that was announced almost a year ago and they've not shown any new footage of it since then, although that happens for a lot of games. Elden Ring, I believe, is the name of that game. So that's probably a game in development hell, if I was to guess. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night for iOS and Android are now available, which I feel like you're going to have a very different experience playing that on cell phones. But if you'd already played the game once before, you might give it a try. We have the Famitsu sales update on Gematsu. I don't want to cover this too much, so let's just look at the new things. Take no Tatsujin Rhythmic Adventure Pack is new at number 6. And then Labyrinth of Galleria for PS4 is new at number 15. So not a lot of new sales. Zoid's Wild Infinite Blast at number 17. Switch sold 117,000 sales last week, while the PlayStation 5 in comparison sold 28,000, so the Switch is still beating them horrifically, including the fact that the Switch Lite alone nearly sold as many as the PlayStation 5s. And who is catching up now? You can see the Xbox Series X is selling as many as the PlayStation 4 is, or they're about 1,000 apart. Whereas the lifetime sales of the Series X is considerably smaller than the much longer last generation PlayStation 4. You can see the PlayStation 4 Pro is totally not selling, and the 3DS is not selling, 3DS LL, and Xbox Ones are not selling. But this actually feels like a generation where Microsoft might actually gain some market share in Japan. I don't think they're going to succeed in Japan by any means. I think Major Nelson's retweeted this Game Informer article talking about how Xbox is exploring accessibility efforts previously ignored, including epilepsy, which might be an interesting argument. Theoretically, I imagine a TV could put a frame delay in all of its footage and test the brightness overall on average of a single frame, and then either reduce or increase the brightness of that single frame so it is not different from the previous frames. And visually that might look horrible, but it would stop any bright flashing lights. But I think at a certain point, people with such severe, easily triggered epilepsy probably should just not watch TV. They should become very, very good book readers and music listeners and things like that. And they probably shouldn't play video games. And that's a sad thing to say, certainly, but sometimes that's just the case. If you're disabled, and I would include epilepsy as a disability, there are just some parts of regular normal life you just can't be a part of. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. Mark Dara and Casey Hudson have left BioWare. That would be the Dragon Age executive producer, which more evidence that there isn't any new Dragon Age in development, and BioWare general manager have left the company. So yeah, we'll probably hear in 6 months to a year that they are working on a new company. I wouldn't even be surprised, and this is an idea that would be so crazy, it would be genius. I wouldn't be surprised if G4 in his reboot hired a bunch of game developers to work as video game critics, as reviewers, or just to be commentators and give their perspective as former game developers on the current games that are coming out. And in that way, lots of successful game developers could quit their jobs at the companies they don't want to work with, go work for G4 for 6 months, and then all of a sudden announce that they're starting a new company and that they're leaving G4. And G4 could just be this middle ground where game developers sit out their non-compete clauses. Now, generally game developers have enough money that they can sit out their non-compete clauses doing nothing. But that'd be a great scoop for G4. They could constantly cycle in other game developers who are sitting out non-competes. Non-competes, not completes. But that would be a very interesting get. On the other hand, I'm not sure game developers would make the best fits as commentators on video games, nor do they really probably want to talk about video games that much. But it also would certainly make a lot more celebrity Ed Boon style game developers out there, which might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. A bunch of new Stadia games have arrived, which I guess that's worth mentioning. Submerged. I forgot the name of this game and I was thinking about it. It's kind of a shame Submerged didn't really go anywhere or get a sequel or get expanded on. It was a little bit too short of a game. Is Submerged Hidden Depths a sequel? Apparently it is, because this is not the artwork of the character in Submerged. Yeah, one of the things I think Submerged really needed was the ability to jump in the water and swim. And that was missing. So they got Chronos Before the Ashes, El Hio, Immortals Phoenix Rising, Outcaster. We're starting to see actual games come out now. Outward, Fogs, Submerged Hidden Depths, a super chill exploration adventure game set in third-person perspective. Miku and Taku can explore a sunken city on their boat or by crawling onto collapsed buildings, ultimately aiming to solve puzzles and uncover a huge mystery. What's interesting about that, I think, more than anything, is that that would not have been something more. Yeah, immediately searching this. Here we have this website called 9 to 5 Google. Review: Submerged Hidden Depths disappoints as a Stadia exclusive. Yeah. And that's kind of a shame. Because I kind of wanted Submerged to succeed. The characters didn't talk in the first game, and that was part of the problem too, is that there seemed to be, they spoke in a non-English, non-real language. Arguably, I would say Submerged, the original game, and fairly obviously this Stadia exclusive sequel, also needed some kind of fight mechanic or something more interesting than what it had. Maybe even go as far as the Zelda Wind Waker route and have dungeons. Because in a weird way, it is kind of a squashed down version of what Wind Waker would have been without dungeons. Valkyrie Chronicle 4, Journey to a Savage Planet, Everspace, Hitman 2, Hello Neighbor, Into the Breach, Kine, Kine, Monster Jam Steel. Free to play games like Destiny 2 also. Yeah, this is a real shame, though, to have an exclusive and then also have it be bad. Although I feel like that is exactly the case as far as what's going to happen with Stadia games, is we're going to have more and more cases where low effort, failed games that people don't really care about, get released on Stadia or get made for Stadia. Yep. Seems like the girl of the first game is connected to the plant people more, and the brother who was sick the whole time and you were trying to help seems to have recovered and gotten a tattoo on his arm that I don't think existed before. And it seems like there might be some places where you light towers and you play as the boys sometimes. You're going to go into sunken depths at some point, although they're showing none of that at all. Hidden depths. It'd be very easy for the flooded buildings to have sections and kind of dungeons below that. Yeah, that's a shame. That's a real shame. Next, we have a game called, we have an article from Gamma Sutra. Modio raises $4 million to grow its cross-platform modding studios. I guess that's Mod.io, is how it's pronounced. Yeah, with a period. Cross-platform modding is an interesting idea. It really would heavily depend on the platform's support more than anything. Game Sutra has an article. Small developers and creators can now use Fmod Studio for free, a end-to-end audio solution. I feel like I've seen a few games that have used Fmod, but I don't feel like it's, frankly, something that a lot of people have used. And at a certain point, I don't know how many audio solutions you really need that isn't just built into just like Unreal or anything, or just use a standard Audacity or whatever the like Photoshop equivalent would be for audio engineering these days. And I still don't feel like there's a great solution or a great embracing of surround sound, or even like more 3D environmental sound effects for even headphones in video games. Hopefully the next generation might push a little bit more movement in that direction, but I imagine they won't do much. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. A VTuber begs Atlas to stream Persona 3 and gets Twitter trending, which, yeah, at a certain point, we know that a lot of YouTubers would like to play Persona 3 in the Persona series and stream it without being content ID'd, and I think actually shut down directly in this case, not even content ID, just DMCA'd. They have not wanted to allow full streaming, and I don't think they've even given even unique YouTubers any specific YouTubers permission. So this very well might be a case where this one VTuber gets permission to stream it and nobody else does, which would also just be inherently unfair. But this is an argument that needed to be taken public, and this needed to be brought in the face of Atlas, and Atlas of Japan in particular, and telling them straight up, like, your obsessive Japanese application of Japanese copyright to American copyright does not work. Your obsessive attempt to protect such an old game now as Persona 3 does not work. You're losing the fandom by doing things like this. You're not losing sales. Even if they were going to make a fairly arbitrary time limitation thing where they said people can stream Persona 1, 2, and 3 now, but we're not going to allow Persona 3, we're not going to allow Persona 4 or Persona 4 Strikers or Persona 5. Even if it was just you can play the old games right now, and then we'll let you stream every game 2 years after it's been released, that would be not legally enforceable, but at least it would be some middle ground. Moving on, we have a Gematsu article. Neptunia Reverse is coming to the West in 2021. I did say there was another Neptunia game that was going to come out. I have so many of these Neptunia games, and I have not gotten around to playing any of them. Although I'm not sure I need to actually play all of them. Reverse might be it's the updated, enhanced version of Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1, so it's like the second or third remake of that series. TechRaptor has an article here. PS5 Vita PlayStation Vita games can't access the PlayStation Store. It's been ongoing for over a day. I wouldn't be surprised if this is less of a bug and more intentional, as the PlayStation Vita is totally not supported at all. Let's see. So many YouTubers tweeting out the same articles about YouTube's new censorship plan. Gamma Sutra has an article. Call of Duty made $3 billion for Activision in 12 months. So clearly Call of Duty is still making Activision money. Nothing really more to say there. TechRaptor has a review for a game called Per Aspera, which seems to be a top-down strategy game. Maybe a tower defense game. Does not look interesting to me from the visuals. They gave it an 8.8. Per Aspera is a stunning realistic planet builder in which you play as an AI test for terraforming Mars. Although its pace is sometimes slow, it's an extremely educational game with a surprisingly deep and touching story. pros are commitment to real-world science makes it an educational play experience. Engaging narrative built around a well-developed central character. Sandbox mode silos you to play around and create ideal Martian environment. Cons is visually busy. Interface can lead to information overload. Steep difficulty curve, especially in early game. Slow-paced beginning, which ramps up only gradually. So, yeah. Even at an 8.0, that still does not look like something I'm interested in. Then they have a review for this game, Dragon's Lair X Replicade, which is a video review apparently. You can see here it's Dragon's Lair on a tiny screen with a control stick and buttons. The question to ask something like this in particular would be, is there a way to plug in a USB device? Or not. Here they're showing off the Laserdisc player that Dragon's Lair was being played and controlled on. So as far as a replica, it is kind of interesting just how much detail you're seeing here. But actual playability without being able to plug in some kind of USB controller seems to be unlikely. There's also an argument here that you should get not only Dragon's Lair but also Space Ace and Dragon's Lair 2 in this. And I bet this is fairly overpriced. HDMI out video. Says it has comfortable controls. This is a weird breakdown though of their videos, and typically I don't pay any attention to their videos, but TechRaptor is trying to do more of that. Rechargeable battery pack seems a little weird too. Of course, you really have to question. See, now the videos jump to something completely different, so their player is totally messed up. Let's jump to another one of their videos. Yeah, no telling as far as the price there, and certainly does anybody really need a replica of Dragon's Lair? That's very questionable. Next, TechRaptor has an article, the best game music of 2020 apparently was Paradise Killer. And here we can see depictions of Paradise Killer. If the music is really that good, I didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. Frankly, I just heard a lot of people kind of mention Paradise Killer for a week, and then most game journalists seem to have gotten bored with it and move on. Here we have a Deadline article. Oscar Isaac to star as Solid Snake in Sony's Metal Gear Solid movie based on a video game franchise, which, alright. Visually, that seems like that would work. Although, arguably, this is a fairly old Solid Snake character, so maybe they would want to start him a little bit younger looking. But, yeah, that's about it. Here we have Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition on Steam, which I can easily put that on the fall list. And we don't have to really go any further there. I'm fairly certain there already was a Dragon's Quest game on Steam, so they've either eliminated the old version for the Definitive Edition, or I'm confused, because I feel like I would have been a little bit more begrudged if Dragon's Quest was not on Steam. Although, there's still plenty of other older Dragon's Quest games that are not on Steam. Of course, there's a danger certainly here where I would have potentially tried to catch up and bought Dragon's Quest XI only to then have a definitive edition come out and potentially want to rebuy the game. and not really being able to justify that financially. Alright, we're at 3 hours and 20 minutes. There's a good 20 games that we haven't covered, and we'll leave for Monday. And I'll look at the Humble Bundle. It's a Humble Choice Bundle, which seems to be showing some games I don't even recognize. Let me see if I can get a better idea. December 2020. Yeah. This game, One Step from Eden, I don't recognize. This Beast Inside, I don't recognize. Indivisibles are a hard one to justify due to the controversy around it, although I could probably just play that game easily. Shining Resonance Refrain. Tabletop Playground. Some ZWE games. Frog Detective games. Path of the Giants. Struggling. There's definitely some games here I do not recognize. But is there any other bundle besides the Humble Choice bundle to talk about? Explore and Expand bundle. Let's see. I think we probably have already seen the Explore and Expand bundle. None of that looks new. Or does it look interesting to me? So yeah, I guess that's to say there hasn't been a new bundle of interest to me. And then I'll check my Twitter real quick and we'll see if there's any major news. I imagine there really isn't. I have been getting a few, like maybe 1 or 2 new followers on Twitter, but overall Twitter in general has proven itself to be fairly useless for communicating or connecting with people. It seems like it really is just a news feed, like an RSS feed, which I was already fairly doing well to emulate and get information from RSS feeds. So, you know, if what's on Steam, for instance, had an RSS feed instead, I probably should just use that, and then I could pretty much unsubscribe from Twitter completely after that point, because I only get small bits of information from like Twitch support and Gamatsu and TechRaptor, and that's about it. It's like the vast majority of Twitter for me is not really anything useful. Let's see. Is there anything new that's even happened? Not really. Alright, well, we have exactly 0 dropped frames today. Still some due to rendering lag and encoding lag, but less than 0.0%. So no real issue there. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.